Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the last Bridge Researchers of 2022. Okay, today we are going to have a very good guest here with us. We are going to have Mr. Paulo Abrantes, but let's first introduce our project here. Well, the Bridge Project and the Bridge Researchers, they come here to create and to bring together Conscientiology researchers from all over the world to facilitate knowledge exchange and sharing of interassistantial experience. This is a free online talk that we held every first Sunday of the month, okay? Today we're doing every 2 months at this year. And then, who is ISIC? ISIC is the Interassistantial Service for the Internalization of Conscientology. It's a non-profit organization ran by volunteers, formerly within the ICCC, International Cosmoetical Community of Conscientiology. ISIC has a status of a pre-conscientiocentric institution, a pre-CI, and we have the motto of opening doors and building bridges. That's the idea. We want to connect the researchers around the world. And then today, we are going to have Mr. Paulo Abrantes with the following topic here, the Assistantial Technicality in International Travels. So let's introduce Mr. Paulo Abrantes. He's a volunteer and researcher of Conscientiology since 1997. He's teacher in Conscientiology since 2005. Panther practitioner since 2008. For who doesn't know, Panther is the personal energy task. It's a conscientiological technique. He's a consciential therapist. He's author of Verbetes, volunteer of the International Consciential Therapy Organization, and a member of the Holotech of CEAEC. He is an undergraduate in psychology and engineering, specialist in water resources, and he has a master in science in sanitary engineering. He worked in international volunteer between 2001 and 2005. And then now I have the pleasure here to invite here Paulo. Welcome, Paulo.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so Paulo, idea here, we are going to have you doing this lecture here, and then I may jump into to make some questions or bring questions from the audience. Okay. And then the floor is yours, Paulo.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And today we're going to talk about the technicalities, assistantial technicalities in international travels. So if you don't mind, Marcel, we can move on to the first slide. So let's talk about the motivation and contextualization of this lecture. First thing is, I talk just a bit about my experience. I lived abroad for 4 years in the context of volunteering in Conscientiology. And it was a very important experience I had. And most of part of the ideas I will share with you has a relation with that trips and other trips I have been doing, international trips, since I was a teenager. Mainly the impactful trips I had the opportunity to have during this year. I've been first to Dubai, and then I went to London in a very different context. So it creates some sort of need to share some of this knowledge. I'm not a professional in international trips. I have to put this down. To be very respectful with you guys, but I think that some issues, some knowledge, I think I have could be of some importance to those who want to take the best of their international trips as well. You can move the next one. Diversity of travels. Also, one thing that I think it helps a lot is when we face different challenges regarding to travels, professional ones, the ones that you do to rest, some sort of need to reestablish your whole somatic health, but also the ones that you try to put some effort to do some sort of assistance, more advanced assistance. We are talking about clarification task. And always bear in mind that when you go there, you are a entirety, you are a consciousness in its entirety. So it's important for us to, when you travel internationally, that you try to keep that in mind in our action, in our thoughts, that we are there. We have most possibly, we have been there before, sometimes doing good things, sometimes not so good things, but it's always an opportunity to reestablish new signatures, and that had important repercussions for ourselves and for the assistants, for the public of assistance that we face in those places. Next one. Other travelers as well. Of course, we talk to other travelers and we learn a lot from that. So some of that experience I will bring in those ideas here. They are in these ideas that I will share with you. Some of these ideas come to these talkings as well. Next one. The context of the conscientiological group travels, I think this is important also for people to discuss more the importance of these travels, the impact of these travels that are made in group with the purpose of assisting environment, people, and places. When people with the same objectives, in the same paradigm, go to that places with the intention of help multidimensionally. Next one. And the important thing is the context of the internalization of conscientiology that we all are facing during these times that we are living. More and more people from other countries that start studying and volunteering conscientiology. We see that as an important movement that we are facing, and ISIC is a good example of that, but also other international institutions, other CIs that are internalize their activities as well. This is important, and the action, the practice of travel internationally is very important for us to enhance the comprehension of the importance and of our role in this as a mini cog in this max mechanism when we do our travel, when we learn and we get better from international travels. We can move to the next one. So this is one thing that I'd like to share with you, the first idea in this lecture, for us to think more about the importance of being more technical when we do this sort of international travels. So I will read with you. In terms of evolutionary interassistantial performance, travels can be amateur or professional, can be technical or instinctive, more effective or less effective, can be mathematical or errant, mature or immature, can be productive or fruitless. So I think that in stage that we are right now in our extension program, or for those who is starting there, just keep that idea in mind, is that we always can do better in our international trips. Of course, we always start from the things that we know, but once we start to understand some techniques that helps us to be the more mature that we can be, as we were in the intermissive period, the better will be the results. And there's also some indicators that shows that, and we're going to go through that during the lecture. We can move to the next one, Marcel. Thank you. So let's talk about some preliminary topics when you talk about travel, interassistantial travels. First thing is important to keep in mind the reason why you are traveling abroad. Sometimes it seems to be very simple, a simplistic idea, but it's not. It's like you are positioning yourself in terms of these international trips. You made a sort of evocation about the sort of trip that you intend to do. So first thing, is this trip mainly ego karmic, group karmic, or polykarmic? Of course, when you do the intention, when you have the intention of do advanced assistance abroad, All of these things, they are put together. But there is always one main aspect here that it may be more highlighted for you. And mainly you start with ego. Sometimes the ego karma. Sometimes you go to the first trip, like when you were 18 years old, and then you start to understand more about yourself. Some new ideas arise. Sometimes it's more amateur, of course, but it doesn't mean that you don't have some highlights or some experience related to group karmic and polykarmic matters as well. Most of us who are volunteering conscientiology, mainly what you can say is that you are dealing with group karmic emphasis. Always that. You always will find in these places people that are related to you somehow, to your past. Self-position, we already talked about it, but self-reflection. One thing, self-reflection is a major important thing when you are intending to travel. Prior to the travel, it's important for us to reflect about this, to reflect about the priority of this travel. These reflections help us to have this cognitive enhancement. It is very important when you are dealing with sometimes a place that you've never been before in this life. So you have to get the most of the information you get from the internet, from books, and sometimes from inspirations as well. It's always important for you to understand your assistantial breath by the time that you're planning that trip. For instance, do you do Panther? This is an important thing. How is your polyglotism? How is your language? I think the first trip I made in terms of volunteering was when I moved to London. The first thing I tried to do was to improve a little bit my English by that time. And it was very important to take the most, even in the beginning of the trip, mainly in the beginning of the trip. One thing about parapsychism, a travel without parapsychism, it will be always, below the possibilities that you can get from this trip in terms of assistance. So, but parapsychism itself is not enough. You have to add the discernment, so it will equal assertiveness in the trip that you are facing. Self-discernment is the best compass that you can have. Without self-discernment, it's very difficult for us to achieve, what we can call some excellency in terms of the possibilities of assist that you may face in that place. To take the best of the resource that you already have inside ourselves, but also at your disposal. Then we are talking related to helpers as well, what they can provide in terms of resource for you to be more successful in your system. So it's very important. Scientificity is always a thing that you don't start in the travel, so you start real right now. To what is that? Is for you to take the events, the phenomena, everything that happens inside and outside yourself, try to connect it and try to reach a solution or an idea or an intention that gets the best for yourself and for others in terms of evolutionary assistance. Synchronicities, they are valuable occurrences, valuable resources, one of the best. Sometimes synchronicities, they don't seem very, we don't capture those synchronicities. So keeping attention, take note of everything. Sometimes the synchronicity that happen now, you only will understand that in 1 month's time or sometimes during the trip. And it gives us some hints about things that we should pay more attention or should do a little bit different than you have planned in relation to what you have planned before. Next one, Marcel. Thank you. Also be aware of the co-travelers. There are always co-travelers. Co-travelers that sometimes they are related to the place you are going to. They start the connection to enhance the connection while you're still in your homeland, but also intraphysical ones. Sometimes you're going with your duo, evolutionary duo, or with a group. So it's very important for you to do the psychometry of this consciousness. It's important because it helps you to adapt your planning to your expectations as well. Sometimes when you're a group, of course, you don't have the freedom, man, to do whatever you want to do, to think it is best. Sometimes you have to understand that as a group, you have your role, you have your responsibilities, and it's to know how to behave in a group also helps in the overall performance of the trip. Holocentric heteroform, very important to try to understand how you are related to that country that you are going to visit. The retroform start acting even before you start, you get the plane and get to the country. Why is it important to understand how this holocentric heteroform works with you? Because some traits, some characteristics, some mechanism of functioning start to arise, and it's important for us to decode that. Sometimes it's a weak trait you are not aware of. Sometimes you start to think and you start to act. You behave differently, and if you are aware of that, it's also an opportunity for you of self-recycling, of better self-understanding. That's why we put this emphasis here in self-consciential therapy. International travels are very important, resourceful, is a good resources of self-investigation until you are self-confronting some aspects of your personality. One important thing, very important thing, is for us to understand that when you are lucid and you have the intention of doing assistance, we always act like a catalyst in every environment that we are going to face when you do these international travels. So returning to the retro environment, catalyze assistance is an important measure of assistance. Some assistance, they are very hard and difficult to do without your presence. Why? Because some extraphysical consciousness who needs help, who needs assistance, they have this rapport with you. Sometimes they are stuck there in some specific holocene for decades, sometimes for centuries. And the impact of your presence there sometimes has a very important repercussions and help the helpers to move forward with the assistance for this extraphysical conscious to be more lucid about his or her own situation. Other important things about travels, international travels, is when you understand about the tocenic signatures. Most of us, we don't go to that place for the first time. It's very difficult that to happen. Something attracted you in that country, and that attraction is related to what you have done in the past. Most of these signatures, as Dr. Waldo used to say, the more you go to the past, the more it stinks. The more it stinks. But anyway, you've been there and you have the responsibility yourself to redo this signature, to put new signature in that place. So it gives that sensation that you are moving forward and you are dealing with that responsibility that you have with the people related to your past. And it is interesting to understand that one of the ways you put new signature is to, for instance, being a book author. Imagine you going in this country with new ideas from your intermissive course, and then you put these books in a bookstore or make a presentation launching in that country of your book. Imagine the repercussion related to that old files that doesn't have any actualization about your new perspective. You left the baratosphere, we left the baratosphere somewhere at some times, and then we go to the intermissive course. We were somehow left behind, and now is the opportunity most of the time for you to get connected with them. Bibliodiaspora is very, would like to point this out, to highlight this project that is conducted by Katia Rakaki and João Aurélio from Africa. We think that this is one of the most important projects that we are facing right now at this time of Conscientiology. That is the possibility that we bring to ourselves and also to the group of Maxi Proaxis, is to plant these Claritask seeds. Putting these books in public libraries is like something that you stay there, and for generations people have the opportunity to be in contact with those ideas, with those books. We have the experience of doing that in 2002. I did that, for instance, in these two major cities in United Kingdom, more than one library, me and my duo, and it was an experience that I wish you have to understand what it means to put these new signatures in places where in the past you have some debts, and it's a very good way of, you know, putting these debts and transforming it in super habits. Okay, let's move to the other one. To the other one. Marcel, if you have some question, feel free, please, to interrupt me. But if not, I can carry. Yes, Marcel.
For sure. Okay. I think that we have one question here from Regina. She mentioned that you already answered it, but would like just to stress a little bit more about those travels also be a self-assistance at the time dealing with your hetero lives. Okay. So a little bit more. Can you go a little bit more on this aspect of our existential series? Okay, our past lives, and then the opportunity to understand a little bit more ourselves the moment that we go through these different environments.
Yes, Marcel, we can deepen this a little bit. The international travels for the lucid person, it is always an opportunity to self-assistance. Let's think about it. Sometimes it's the most important thing, because if the assistant is not lucid enough, not does not take the results of the experience they are facing in that country to make the person reflect upon some ideas, upon some new ideas, or some recycling that the person needs to do. So if the person does not take profit of that, of course the assistance in the future will be not as good as it could be. So, of course, these international travels, they have a very important repercussion in terms of self-assistance. But the most important thing and parameter to think about that is how those experiences have turned into recycling, intra-consciential recycling. This is one of the most important things. We're going to tackle this subject later on. But very good question, Regina. Thank you very much. And retro lives as well. For the person who has the best intentions with these international experiences, they will get in touch with some elements that are related to the past. Energy attracts, because of the energy, because of the hotel scenes, you always find your old fellows and old places that are related. And what you do on those places, what you do with these people is what you're going to bring more in the next slides. How do you deal with people that are related to your past? Do we still think badly about people, or do we take the most of that? Do we use power diplomacy to tackle those situations? Do you use only our current cultural point of view when we interact with people? Or are we already able to be more flexible and to use a better approach to have a better rapport with those people that we find in the past? So, again, Regina, it's always a question of qualifying all of those things. We can do self-assistance, and you can deal with your retro lives, but you can do it in a better way. You also can do it in a better way.
Thank you, Paulo. And Paulo, just another question. Okay, you're talking about the assistential breath. And then, what's your experience on the doing Panther in different countries as you perform these trips?
Marcel, I think one experience I had was the most significant for me was when I've been to Dubai. I spent there 18 days. It was a professional trip, but I made the how do we say in English? I made it a rule for me to do Penta every day, and it makes the whole difference. So even with a straight schedule there, I wake up at the same time in the hotel, and I notice one important thing: the assistance during the day was much enhanced because of the Penta. It's like we know here when you are doing Penta here in our country, in our house, we know that it becomes the basis of your assistential day. you take the little by little, our effort, our challenge is to bring the the possibility, the assistentiality we do during the Panther, and we extend it through the day. In the international context, in my experience, it happens even with more intensity, and because I perceive that is even easier for the helpers to be in contact with you and to interact more to the environments that you are in. I don't know if I answer your question, Marcelo, but this is one thing that brings to my mind when you ask these questions. And I know that doing Penta abroad is not an easy thing. It requires some organization. So, for instance, when you go to a trip where you try to get some leisure, sometimes you have this. You have to consider this. You are not, if you are in one place, you are not in another. So you have sometimes to open the possibility of spending 1 hour in a different country where you don't have much time to go to every place, but instead, even though you stay in the Penta, because the repercussion in terms of assistentiality will be much increased.
Yeah, no, and this is a very interesting topic always. And then just a reminder to the group that we are going to have the Penta Forum that's coming now in December. And then you can get more information about it through the ISIC channels. Okay, so should have a translation, simultaneous interpretation to English on the Penta Forum. But that's great. Thanks, Paulo.
Thank you.
Back to the presentation.
General avoidances. I think it's important to point out some avoidance that are very important if you want to make the best of our assistential potentiality abroad. One of the first things that I recommend, in my experience as well, is to avoid and at the same time understand euphoria. Euphoria is a good thing when it's just temporary. It happens when you face some information, but then it's important the person to put back the feet on the ground and see why this kind of repercussion happened and was the essential thing, the essential understanding of this phenomena that had just happened to you. Important that it turn into motivation. Very good. So if you start with euphoria and ends in motivation, that will be a good thing. Other thing important, very important to avoid and to understand in your trip, in your travel, is when you have those, impulsivity or precipitations, it does not help at all. Remember that you have these impacts of, being back to a context that you have been experienced before. Sometimes it has these repercussions. You see that reality and you react instinctively. So it's important for you to have the time to process those connections with those realities that you're going to reface or to establish again. So toughness, of course, toughlessness is important thing. It's something that doesn't help. So if you do that, it's like you are acting by instinct, and most of the time it does not lead you to a good ending in terms of taking the best of your opportunity. Other thing is it's important in self-consciential therapies when pathological dramomania. I saw a lot of people, not necessarily in Conscientology, but people that I saw in these international trips. They are going from country to country, but lost anyway. So if you are going, is the other thing, the best thing is for you is to, or for us, is to have this sense of no roots. This is good. If you go to many countries, if you take the best of this experience for you to enhance the sense of universalism, and if this intention is very well established for you, that's fine. But it's always important for us to see if you are not experiencing some sort of pathological dramomania. Okay, so self-criticism is a very important asset when you're talking about international travels. I saw people that went to a place, became so euphoric, so fascinated with this new country that they, from one time, instantly the person said, "No, I'm going to move back here," and sometimes because of the glories that the person experienced on this continent and start dropping from one country to another. So it's a very important thing to think through. One important thing, sometimes the environment leads us to act like a mass tourist. You know, that tourist that goes like, like a manade to some places, and like you start being part of the unthinkable mass. One thing important to avoid and to be very conscious about it. One thing that we need when you travel is some sort of flexibility, so rigidity does not help. Of course, we are going to tackle this in a few moments. It's important to have a schedule. It's important to do, to program your trip, but it doesn't mean that you have to be very rigid to that. Sometimes some occurrence that you face international travels will tell you that you need to make small changes. Okay. Another thing is the miser and the Scrooge, the person who has this tendency. You're going abroad, you that live in Brazil, the exchange rates are not very good, and you start to calculating things. So the most important thing for you to overcome that is to act planning, to know exactly how much money you need, so you don't have to think, no, I'm not going to enter this museum because it means 20 pounds, it's saying 100 reais, I'm not going there. So it's something that does not help at all. Sometimes the best places for you to do some kinds of assistance or rapport or self investigation are places that you have to pay something. Okay. Emotionalisms. This is one of the things that is most important for us to be aware of. If you get into some emotionalism, try to be aware, try to recompose yourself as soon as you can, for you not to lose some good opportunities in terms of ideas, in terms of opportunities. Sometimes it doesn't help at all. Okay. Of course, it's very normal to have emotional reactions, but the important thing is that it doesn't last too much, so you have time to process it in a better way. Next one, please. Let's talk about some main issues related to the pre-travel moment, which is very important if you want to do a good trip. I know people who take this very, very seriously. And I know when the person comes back from the trip, how important really it was in terms of planning. So the first thing I would recommend is to establish a main goal, to keep this, to bear in mind that this main goal is going to be like the main street of your journey, you see. So if you want to go, if you have to go a little bit further from this main goal, you know that you have to come back. It's important that this is very clear for you. This main goal could be a group, could be a specific place. It varies a lot, but it's important for the person to establish this main goal. The other thing is study. Going to the place without knowing anything of the place, it's like a half travel. So sometimes you won't get the helpers won't have ways to communicate with you if you don't understand some facts related to its past, history, culture, personalities, connections with the new hotel scenes, your connections with the new hotel scene. Through study, you're going to see the similarities, the familiarities that you have with this hotel scene. And sometimes they will be very important to establish some contacts or to connect you with some specific scenarios of assistance in the country you face. You talk to someone, someone native of that country. If you don't know anything, it will be very difficult to start, though we're going to talk about power diplomacy, to start talking with that person. Other thing, finances. Try to find the necessary money to maximize assistance, nor more nor less. So it's important that this finance doesn't take any risk for you in terms of economic aspects, economic issues. So once you organize the finance to go to the trip, this is less burden for you during the trip. Patience. One thing that I saw in myself and other colleagues as well is that it's like they get some sort of passion for the first ideas. And most of the time, first ideas are not the best ones. It's just the first idea. The person has to deepen a little bit more, and it will have an impact in the itinerary and also in sometimes even in the objective um, of the trip. Lucid planning, we're going to talk about this in the next slide. You can move on, Marcel, if you don't mind. So, planning. First thing, research, facts and parafacts guide itinerary planning. So sometimes we start doing the first scratch. You start from scratch. Okay. And then you see, okay, it makes sense, that's fine, and it's not really clear. But then it's very common that some synchronicities happens when you're doing that. And this is an important resource. I can give you a personal experience when I went to FIC in 1999 in Barcelona. I want to visit Europe, some places after FIC, after Barcelona. And I had this idea that there was one country that were missing in my planning. And okay, so I start to think about it. But one day my grandma, she gave me a book, a magazine. I never saw this magazine before. She never did it before to me. But then I go straight to the last page, and there was a page that were scenario of Berlin in a place where once there was the wall passing through that. And I felt a big repercussion of that. And the idea that came to me was it was not as it was before, as it were before. And then I said, no, this is the place I have to go. And then it showed to be a very important decision. It was essential in this trip I made to Europe. Okay, so this is just an example of that. The inspiration synchronicities is very important to be conscious and to give value to them. Inspirations doesn't mean something that you have to do automatically, but at least you have to put it down to see if it, for instance, first time, first, you have to see if it comes from a helper, if it comes from an intruder. So this is important issues and aspects of the trip that I would recommend for all of us to take into consideration. Core places. Establish core places that you know that you have to be there, to focus, to get this as a main focus and to put everything, in confrontation with that core places. So it will give you the understanding of how many times that you have to be there and to avoid some problems with distances and with the timing of your travel. Also the duration. So there is the ideal time when you go there, if you're going to spend there 15 days or 2 months, you see what's possible. Sometimes it's not possible for you to spend 1 or 2 months there. Could be an ideal timing for your travel to spend the whole period. But then see what's feasible. Then you try to read something in between. Sometimes you can extend 3 or 4 days in your trip, and sometimes you perceive that would be of great importance. Remember, as the more you stay in a place you choose for this trip, the more time you have to take the most of the assistential opportunities to do the best you can in terms of assistance. Another thing is related about times. Sometimes it's a problem for some of us. Number of places to visit versus time on each place. I always recommend you to, in these core places that I have been told before, that you try to spend more time there. Let's give you an example. If you go to British Museum, I had this experience, it's very difficult for you to spend less than 1 day. So if you want to plan to go to British Museum and plan to be just half period, you're going to be a little bit upset later because there's a lot of things to go. If the British Museum is the main core of your investigation, try to spend 2 or 3 days. This is just an example. But this is a problem that you have to face. It's a dilemma. Of course, sometimes you perceive that you some 10 or 20 places it would be ideal for you to go. But at the same time, if you go to those 20 places, you're going to spend less time. So the quality of your experience will be diminished. So this is an important thing to tackle before your trip, when you're doing the planning, when you're doing your itinerary plan. And finally, the synchronization. This is the most important thing when you do this planning. You have to be very patient, because you start doing the place you want to visit. Then you see that there's 2 or 3 cities you want to visit that would be important in this opportunity. But then you have to think about accommodation, and you have to see the timetable of these venues you're going to visit as well. So you have to put this together to establish the best planning. Sometimes I take 1 month to finalize my itinerary plan, because I have even to give time for these synchronicities and these new experience to happen, to sometimes guide me in terms of the best itinerary. Yes, Marcel.
Yeah, Paulo, quick comment on this is that we have a trend to be extremely optimistic about our timetables. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
I'm one of the masters of it, like the think that I can do such a amount of things in a particular slot of time, and that's not the reality. Okay. And then you talk about assistential breath before, and then there is another one that's your breath, yeah, also physical one, because sometimes
Yes.
you need also to place some periods that you intend to rest, because you're talking about the British Museum, and then I remember that I almost collapsed after visiting it because of so tired that I was, because of so much walking and around the places, and we could not see a fraction about that museum, and every place that
Yeah.
you go there, you would have some kind of repercussion.
Yes, Marcelo, and one thing that you brought is very important. We have to remember that we are not going some. There are some places that we need to return, we need to go back. So, for instance, this example of British Museum. The first time I've been there, I spent the whole day there, and then I think another half day I spent there. But when you go to a second trip, and then when we have a more strict objective, sometimes you go to a specific area of British Museum, and then you can do it in half period. So it's important for us to. This is very important that you brought. Uh, let's think about a real breath. Sometimes going the whole day walking from one place to another makes us getting less of the experience, because you have a soma. That's the problem. You have a soma, and you need to have a good sleep. And we're going to talk a bit
and,
about this a little bit later. But
and then you stop having the right perception because you are so tired, or you are hungry, or you are angry or hungry, and so
yeah,
on.
exactly,
And then
exactly. Yeah, in my experience, Marcel, first, there are some days that we did only 2 things. It is in the we have scheduled that 2 things, but it was so intense in terms of perceptions, and we are full of energy. You could say, no, I could run this park 1 hour, but it's not the case. Yeah? You have to think about this new, inputs that you have. You need time to absorb them. On the other, there are other days that is more or less like that. It was like run like hell. You see, you have to see all these things, and you see you have the energy to do that, and you see that was important to do that. But if you do that, do it consciously. Do it because you know there's no other option, and try to optimize the most you can. Sometimes we have to bring food from the supermarket to sit in a in a chair and have your lunch there. Other times, no, you have to go to a restaurant to feel the environment. So that's why it's very important the person to be lucid on these trips. Sometimes it is like you are teleguided. We're not teleguided, of course, but sometimes you have um, this experience, this little experience. You have a very good word for that. It's not just coming yet, but it's like you have a small taste of what is being a teleguided international trip. Is a very good time for you to experience that. You know that you have to go to this way. You know that the energy is taking you there. You feel the synapse of your helpers. So that's fine. Sometimes you'll be surprised. I was not thinking about running a lot, but it's like the flux of the cosmos is taking me. You know what I mean?
I know that, and I had an experience about it recently that I visited with my wife the Washington D.C., United
Yeah.
States, and then we went to Chinatown, and then in Chinatown we found a Jewish temple there on a corner, I and six, and then it was interesting because it gave some repercussions to my wife. And then, as we were walking back to go to a particular museum, we walked by chance, like the synchronicity, in front of the Portrait Museum of DC. And then we started walking around the place, and we went through some portraits there. That, as we were looking to the figure of the person, we were having repercussions all the time. And then like triggering some hypothesis on some seriological research to go a little bit deeper. So we need
Very
to,
interesting.
and it was kind of different. But I have here a question from Liliana Alexandre. Liliana, she's asking you, Paulo, about doing Panther abroad during your trip to Dubai. Can you tell us some more about your perceptions during Panther and during the day in relation also to paradiplomacy?
Yes. One important thing about the power perception is to understand how the environment, the extraphysical environment of the city was very complex. So it takes a lot of, not takes a lot, but a lot of ideas bring to my mind during that period. That at the same time that the extraphysical environment was not clean, let's say like that, at the same time there were teams of extraphysical helpers. You're talking about urbanization, acting in a way that it was very difficult for me to understand. But imagine that a city that was built from zero, from scratch, on the desert, in a place where there are some villagers there, very, let me see, ways of life that are there for centuries. And then it comes with this whole city. It's like a Las Vegas. Né? Some people say this is like a Las Vegas. Marcel who lives there, he can say much better than me. But as my experience in my traveler, as a Panther practitioner in Dubai, one thing that kept my attention is that the consistency of the assistance they are doing in that environment. And about paradiplomacy, a lot of ideas came to me as well, because I was in a context that I don't know if you know about Expo Dubai 2020 that was held in 2022, and I was there for 18 days, and I have the opportunity to visit mainly maybe 80 pavilions, different countries. And it's like you go inside, it's like you are in the country. The whole scene is related to the country. In an environment, in a universalistic environment, where the main challenge is to how to better deal with these people, to get this rapport, and to enhance the possibility of assistance. Maybe to myself, for me, it was very impactful to participate in this sort of event. And maybe, who knows, we can think about participate one day to a Universal Expo would be an outstanding experience in terms of extension programming.
Yeah, and then Liliana is mentioned here. Interesting that some people from our group at some point lived in Dubai. Yes, yeah, I live in Dubai, Lily. Uh, I was there for 1.5 years. It was for me that time very challenging because there is a strong religious holocene in the place. And then the environment, it was a little bit different from what Paulo experienced with the expo. And then it comes also with that reflection that it's if to visit a place, you need to look for your existential breath and what the scenes that you need to do in that moment. Imagine when you are moving to that country for a period of time. Okay? That's also something interesting. You need to understand if you are going to have this paradiplomacy, if you are going to be able to keep your self-research, or if you are going to be absorbed by the Holocene of the place in in some way. For me, it was very difficult to do the let's say my Panther during that period of time. Yeah, and then that's something that's a kind of paradox, because at the same moment that have the religious Holocene, there is this materialist Holocene there, because it's everything about the gold, the luxury lives and so on, that it's portrayed there. So it's a kind of really interesting paradox.
Marcel, it's important. I think there's an idea important. I just saw the comments of Liliana. Regardless the condition of the place you are going to, let's think about the subject of pre-intermissive. When you go to the pre-intermissive, you go into barotrosphere. But anyway, you have a hole there. You are not there by chance, as we are not there in Dubai or any other country by chance. There is a connection. Sometimes you can see that in the first time. Sometimes you know about this only when you after the summer. But anyway, one important aspect of any international trip is that you see yourself and you put yourself as a lucid cog, a lucid cog in the maxing mechanism. This is the most important because it's very easy for you to be, to be less lucid, to see the bad aspects of the city. And we are not saying that we don't have to see that, on the contrary, we have to see all the aspects of the city, of the people, weak traits, strong traits. But at the end, as assistants, we have to, to stay with the best of the city, with the best of the people, because this is how we do rapport in terms of getting better results in terms of performance, assistential performance.
Yeah, no, I was not very lucid that period of time, but I could see some of it is still this universal opportunity for universalism and assistant when I was there. Like I worked with a group that we did some training for them. In the trip, we had the group of it was 17 people, and we have 12 different nationalities and languages in that group. So it was
Very
great.
interesting.
The
Lots of
English that was
material,
our
isn't
bridge.
it?
Sorry.
Lots of material, lot of material for your research. Very interesting.
Yeah,
It involves more than one country. See, it's interesting. Sometimes you go to a country, but you have connections with people all around the world. This is something important to pay attention.
yeah, and exactly like Liliana is saying, nothing by chance. We've been connected to the Arabic world at some point, and it may be easier for us to help some in the Helbergs there. And
Yeah.
then that's the reality. Thanks, Liliana, for your comments here. And then let's go back here to the
So let's move to the other. Yes, thank you. So one of the optimizations that I see is the best for pre-travelers is to really put some efforts in doing self-reflection. I recommend the 5 hours reflection technique and with topics that are related to this trip. You will be amazed at how many new ideas you can have that will have practical results in your travel. In advance, context and purchase in advance. This is very important. It's important not to allow that some problems occur during the trip that are very easy for you to avoid. So, like buy trips in advance, you'll be paying even less if you do that. Sometimes this overbooked, so you get there and you are very frustrated because you can't reach a place, or sometimes you go there and didn't notice that the place is closed during that period of time. So whatever you can do in advance, do it. Even connecting people. In this last experience we have in the United Kingdom, we did a travel with the objective of researching a retro personality. My Jew did that, Luciani, and I have my research as well, that person who was with this person in the past. And it was very amazing to see how much of importance it was to connect with those people, librarians, people that were leading community projects. It opened the field for the assistant when we went there. So it's one thing that I strongly recommend. Checklists and to-do lists. This is very much important. I saw some people that say things like that. No, I don't want to be a checklist or a to-do list because I have the fear of being very rigid. It's not that. If you do that lucid, you see that things will happen much more fluidly, smoothly when you are in your experience the travel, experience the trip. About luggage is very important. I have the tendency in the past to bring more luggage because I always have this thinking, no, maybe you need that, maybe you need that. There's a technique that I read once that says something like that. Okay, put everything you think you need in the trip in your suitcase, then cut half. This is a way for you to think about what will you need in this experience. You have a colleague, Julian, the host, that he's the master of that. He goes only with one small piece of luggage. He uses laundries. And we did that in this trip to London. Much better, you get much more mobility. You don't have to think about where you're going to put your luggage, and you need to be agile. You need to have agility during these trips. And you don't want to carry things with you. We have a big luggage because we brought a lot of books and then we distribute there, and this was important. But we have this experience with the laundry, and we will stick to this technique in future travels as well. In terms of prophylaxis, preventing domestic problems when traveling, try to leave everything settled when you leave. Accounts to pay, accidents that may happen during an absence in your house. Sometimes you have to leave the key with your friend. Things related to electricity, everything that will have as a result you being more free to really connect it, to really live the experience of being in another country without have to reconnect to your country, not because of someone that is in need or something like that, but because you forget to do something that was feasible to do. Another thing is the presence. This is very important. Is one thing that I see a lot. People go and, there is a limit, of course, to things. Of course, it is interesting sometimes when you share some things in Facebook or with friends. That's fine. But there is a fine line between you being present automatically and then you be monopolized by the cyberspace. And each person will have a balance on that. I am the person who, in my case, I'm not recommending it to anyone, but I really don't like, I put the mobile in my pocket, put the silence mode, and when I need to take a photograph, I take a photograph, but I don't share anything on the Facebook, at least during the time. So that thing that you are eating something, you take a photograph and put in your groups, I think this is counterproductive. Because you lose it, you are always reconnecting to people you are used to, you continue to have relations when you go back to your country. But that is the time for you to establish new connections. So everything you can do to preserve this possibility of these new connections or new reconnections from the past, the better will be in terms of assistential performance. You can move to the next one, Marcel. Now we're going to talk about in travel main issues, about the moment where you will be traveling. I'll continue to speak about that. This is the continuation. Mental summer vacation is alienation. Sometimes people say, I want to travel because I want to have vacation from the mental summer. These things does not exist. If you left your mental summer aside during the trip, it's not going to be the same trip that, or at least the trip you tended to have as a assistential agent. Consciential hygiene, this is very important. Some places it's almost inevitable, not inevitable, but it's very automatic for you to see the worst of the place. One technique is, first, don't think badly about people. Of course, this is a hint for our everyday life, even here, anywhere. but it's somehow very much important when you are abroad. And one thing of doing that is trying to see if a thing is 90% ugly, see the 10% of beauty. This is a very good way of connecting in a assistential way. Getting the best of people and places. So you see everything, the bad and the good, but then you stay with the best of the place and people, so you can have a better performance. Candy's technique is a technique of Dr. Waldo. He said, doce de leite. Yes, we have here a special candy. And he said, no, give candies to everybody. So if you saw someone that does not treat you well, give candies in form of energy or a form of a small present. These have a significant impact. Parasecurity. This is very important. Many accidents that we see that happen in these trips is related to lack of attention in terms of parasecurity. This is very important. This is related to cosmetics. If in doubt, abstain. This is very important in trips. If you don't think you can go to, you should go to a place, don't go. For instance, when I go to England, there is one place that I don't have any will or any intention of going to there. Could be different to another person, but I'll give you this place. I don't go to the Imperial War Museum. I don't have maturity and I don't have priority to go to that place. Maybe one day, I don't know, but I don't go in that place, and I respect that perception of mine, which is different from when there is a place it would be good for you to be there, but for some irrationality you don't go. This is another thing, different thing. Travel diary. This is very important to keep a diary throughout the trip. Some people like to go with the notebook and stay with the notebook everywhere. I think that creates some sort of inefficiency in terms of registration. A diary is very simple. You open the diary and start writing, then you can put in the notebook during the night or when you come back to Brazil or the country you live in. But this is very important. Everything inside, power perceptions, main occurrences, encounters, try to put everything there. Don't trust your memory. You see, if you trust your memory, you lose some essential occurrence that you faced during that trip. The best essential qualifier it is, but as I told you before, it requires organization, it requires planning. If you are in doubt about the doing Panther, the best thing to do is sometimes to avoid it. But on the other hand, I always insist, try to make the best you can to do Panther. If you think it's not secure, there's a problem of power security, then it's another thing. Okay, let's move to another one. Optimizations about the when you are during the travel. Okay, so neophilia, openness. If the person goes to another place, being the same person the person used to be in the original place, you're gonna lack a lot of experience. The tendency is that. So try to see other approaches. Try to see how different in different ways you can manifest yourself. You have been passing through a lot of cultures in previous lives. It's not that difficult for you to sometimes act a little bit as a multicultural being. That's the techniques that you propose here. I'm proposing that technique, okay? So multicultural consciousness technique. Try to be a collective of culture that you have experienced before. It's much more, the results are much more significant when you do that. If you stick to your own culture, you'll be facing some problems in establishing rapport and connection with people from that country. Blank state techniques, another one. Blank slate techniques, another one. It's like that ET vision, see? Extra conscious ET vision when the person comes from Mars. You know about that. In Brazil, we sometimes use the expression, as you were never in this place before, you are seeing everything for the first time, and it's a good way to have new ideas and to act in different ways that you are not used to, but would be very interesting to to act like that. Avoid a priori attitudes. This is the most common thing I see in international trips. The person sees, the traveler sees the place with the previous eyes. See, like he were visiting a neighborhood in his own country. So one thing is to avoid, to understand and see when it's happening. When you see the first idea that comes in that context, the first idea sometimes is much more related to your values, to the objective reality that you're facing there. Adaptability, better participative experiments. I guess the question of if you adapt better, you have more participative experiences. It means you are in the same scenario and people are not even noticing that you are someone that comes from abroad. It's like you are unperceptive there. At the same time, sometimes parasanitary encapsulation is needed. Sometimes you have to encapsulate yourself, not to have the repercussion of the environments that sometimes are not very healthy, and sometimes you have to encapsulate some occurrence, some scenarios, some group of people for the experiment or the stance, the assistance get better. But you know that because mainly because of the proximity of the helpers, you have intuitions about that. The organization is very important. It's to be anything related to anti-dispersion is important. To organize your trip is a way for you to avoid anti-dispersion and to have the schedule at hand. Sometimes you don't remember exactly the time you have to be in one place to another, and it's important to calculate even the time that will bring to take you from one place to another, so you avoid surprises. Sleep time is very important. Projections or somatic health. If you don't sleep well, you see that the performance is going to go down. The capability of percepting things or to have ideas or to act in the best way will be diminished somehow. And the thing about lucidity, there are some unnecessary detours. The person goes in the shopping to do one thing, but see the other stores and loses the idea of objective of prioritization. In the international scenario, is the same thing. So it's very important to be aware of not going to unnecessary detours, but at the same time, there are necessary adaptations. I remember, for instance, in this last trip to United Kingdom, that we did some detours. Were not expected to do, but they were very important to be made. If you didn't do that, the experience will be diminished as well. Let's move to the other one. Now let's talk about some issues related to post-travel. So the travel does not end when you get back to the airport, when you get back to your hometown. So it's very important for us to read and complement the travel diary. Sometimes something's lacking there, we forgot to write down. And at the same time, we're doing analysis. This is the time to connect some dots that were impossible to connect when you were experiencing the trip. So post-trip writings is very important. Now you have, this broad view about the situations, and some ideas may arise. It's important to write this down. Photographs, writings, and ephemeral objects, try to organize them. Could be in a box, could be in a sort of, like this. I forgot the name of this, but anyway, help me, Marcel. Sometimes you have to use that one. Thank you.
It's a folder.
It's a folder. Thank you very much. Sometimes you need to put this in a folder. You see the best thing, but in a way that you can consult this when you need. One of the things that I think is most important is to understand, observe the necessary things that you need to face because of the results of the trip. Some of these weak traits, some of the ways we act during the trip shows a lot of the aspects of ourselves that sometimes we haven't seen before. and it's important to face it and to tackle it and to confrontate it. Então, and then sometimes this recent started in the trip. It's a good thing. You perceive some ways of reacting, and then you establish the necessary adjustments during the trip. Other times it's just raise a new thing. Sometimes I saw people who had looked for consciential therapy just because of this new experience. It was very important to do that. Group of karmic credit books, a very good technique. It's a Assistantial technique where you rest every evolutionary encounter, in this case, abroad. Even the guy that was in the coffee machine that treated you well or treated you badly, even this guy is important to put in your book. And it's interesting because when you do that after, when you are back from your travel, it's like you make a good evocation of that situation, and the repercussions are very good. The consequence to short, medium, long-term planning. Review your planning. See if there's something new that come because of this trip. It already happened to me, even in the long-term horizon. And also the viewpoints. It's important that this experience turn into evolutionary results, the sense of priority. So one article, for instance, that we are writing is a direct repercussion of one of those trips. But the ideal is to write more than that, even a book, or maybe even if it is an indirect consequence. You don't have to write necessarily about the travel experience, but the new ideas that you brought, the motivation that you find during these trips, the ideal is to turn this into things that could be, replicate to others, that could be disposed to others. Okay, can move to the next one. We are getting almost in the end of the presentation. So in terms of professionalism, qualifying our assistance in international travels implies lucid attention to the detail in every meaningful aspect of the trip, from planning to post-evolution. This is very important thing to think about. Another thing is the trail that you see because of this trip. So the results that you see from that trip is a very good indicator of how good this trip was in terms of assistance. So I will leave this with you, but let's move to the next slide. There are another two ideas that I think is important to share. The repercussion of cont derived from the international assistance may result in a better sense of universalism. So sometimes it's important to reflect upon that. Am I a more universalistic person because of this travel, or did I came exactly the same as I was before? So this is an indicator that maybe we need more international trips to enhance this perception of the human family, or not only the people that you live with, or in the city you live in, or in the country you live in. The best result of assistential travel is interconsciential recycling. If it does not pull any string of your recycling, you could have done better. We could have done better. So always important to think what kind of recycling, of kind of impactful therapy we received from this experience. There is always potential for that. Let's move to the next one, to the last one. This is one writings of Dr. Waldo from Lexo of Orthopensatas. It's not translated yet, but I did, this translations could be better, but I think it is important because it says something about the importance of planning the trip. Mainly when you have the interest of doing assistance to do qualification tests, you want to spread more in a practical way the information and the knowledge you have brought from this existence, and that started in your intensive course. So changing from human holotosync to another, which means traveling, allows the interaction for the better of the circle of prejudice in which the lucid conscience is inevitably involved. So living in a country, in the same country, inevitably leads us to that. We develop some sort of prejudice. So we are very connected. We accept more people that we know, that you're used to facing every day. And sometimes we forget that the world is much bigger, much larger than that. Number of people that are connected to our group karma is much broader than the people that we see in our daily lives. So in this way, it makes some sort of repercussion in the intimacy of our self-to-scenes. In this way, we assess the value of the planet trip or research excursion. So with that, I think we came to the almost to the end of this lecture. And if you want to have one question, Marcel, if you want to say something, let's move on till the end of the lecture.
Yes, and thanks, Paulo. Excellent presentation, excellent lecture. Thanks very much. And then I think that one thing that comes out and jumps in front of my eyes is when you look to the number of slides about planning and pre-travel compared to the travel itself and the post-travel. Okay, because I think that we underestimate several times the importance of planning. Would like to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, Marcel. If you don't do a very good planning, of course, you're going to be there, you're going to have experiences. And I remember when I do like that, as you're saying, without any planning, when I was 18 years old and I traveled the whole Europe. I didn't do any planning. And for sure, some coincidences, some phenomena, some synchronicities happened. And it was very important for me at that time in terms of self-knowledge, in terms of assistance as well. But with the experience that we gather from being more mature, at least in terms of biological terms, you see that planning always make a big difference. You always can do better. And sometimes the most important thing that you could do in terms of assistance at that time, they are closely related to the planning, because it's not just to have a script, it's much more than that. It's that you start connecting with that whole to scene, with that helpers from that country, from your helpers, the helpers that are interested in doing assistance because of your presence. If you start this connection before, of course, during the trip, you're going to be much more aware. You don't lose time. You don't, like errors and mistakes and asserts. You don't have this sort of problems. It's much more fluid. You see. And the results, they are, in my case, at least I can say about my case, the results about planning in a trip makes it much better, make the results much broader in terms of not only number of people assisted, but the quality of the assistance you do, the priority group that you must face in this trip. You see, I don't know if I answered your question, but anyway, I agree with you. It's important for us to plan and to experience the difference between a non-planned travel to a planned travel in a way that your intention is to act as a head cognitive agent.
And I have had also this experience because I had some trips that they did that they were very well done, very well use it, use it the time in a proper way because of the proper planning. And then I would make extrapolation when we look to the uh, evolution, looking for the intermissive courses, because what we are right now is just a big trip. And then the intermissive course, it's really the opportunity to have a proper planning about what we need to do it in this planet.
Yes. In Barcelo, you see, when you are planning, of course, you don't, get everything that you do hour by hour. But these main points, they are very good for you to not to lose the perception of the priority. We have the main stream. If you're going to make a detour, you know where to go back. This is the most important thing about planning. I have, for instance, an experience in the last day of my trip to England, one of the most significant ones. It was not planned, but not planned, the whole experience, but we know that we have to be in a specific place. But from that place, it brings us to another, and it brings us to the last one. 2 hours before we have to go back to the airport, and was one of the, when you say, oh, this is the, the when you end something greatly, like a grand finale, you see, it was like that, because it crowned the whole experience that we have in a place that was most important. It has a significant importance in our research. It all happened in the last day. And it was because we sent an email to that person before. Look, the thing about you connected prior to that, the lady of the was a librarian, told us, "Oh, you were from Brazil, weren't you? I told you that we haven't had time to make an appointment. Okay, okay, let's go. Can you be here in half an hour? Oh, yes, for sure, half an hour. We will be there." And it was very interesting, and it was a very important opportunity. But you see, again, the connection before the travel made it possible at the time.
Yes. And we had here a question here from Regina. During the pandemic, we could not travel a lot or not at all. How will we need to consider those experiences in terms of para safety or any preparation?
Regina, let me see if I understand the question. Okay, during the pandemic, we could not travel. Okay, we couldn't travel. How will we need to consider those experiences in terms of para safety or any preparation? No, okay. You can make a preparation for time where you could do the trip. You can do the trip. Or let's give an example about the United Kingdom. We have this travel plan for 2020. We have to postpone it, and we did that. But look, one important thing is not because we travel a lot that makes us more universalistic or less parochial. The important thing that I see is that you can be universalistic even living in a place for the whole life. This is one thing that I think that is important to share. But international trips, they are very good techniques for one who wants to enhance this perception, to internalize this kind of universalist traces that are not yet so developed. So when we think about international travel, let's think, we are bringing with us ourselves. Let's see if we understand that. If I go to Japan or if I go to Africa, I'm not running from myself. I'm bringing myself in this trip, and the better I take the opportunities that I have in my hometown, in my daily life, the best will be the results in this new environment. And when I get back, it doesn't necessarily have to have the taste that, oh, I would like to be traveling my whole life. No, sometimes it's the paradox. You feel the need to be more in your place, doing new routines, and be more productive. So being universalistic doesn't mean being traveling a lot. But being universalist means that we start to understand the importance of taking the best of our international travels.
Perfect. And then one thing that I loved here in your presentation, Paulo, it was you talked about sharing the evolutionary results of your trips, your learnings, your routines, and so on. I think that it's a great point.
Yes, Marcelo, just to complement that, imagine if you are a teacher at IIPC, for instance, your teachings, the way you teach should enhance somehow. This is a way of sharing these things. Not only writing things, the most advanced ones, all of us have to pursue that. But everything you do in your life, in terms of assistant, should have some consequences, beneficial consequences of that trip. Some impact that you have outside. Let me give you an example. Uh, when you go back from a trip where you have contact with a lot of culture, the first thing is that when you come back and you have, for instance, this class these classes with the students, you see that you see them in another way. You start thinking, this guy has been from my past. Have I met this guy in the place I just visited? So you see new horizons, new ways of thinking about the relation that you have with the people you assist and become assisted as well. So this sense of everyone is in the same boat is very helpful when you do that.
Yeah, thanks. And then Regina just wants to make herself clear. The pandemic plays a role in the Hilberts. Do you qualify better, more and more?
Oh, sure. Let's remember that the real basic brings some opportunities. Of course, it was not good, no one likes it, but helpers do what they can with the reality they face. One of the best things about the pandemics was that people start to reflect more about their lives, about their habits, about their behaviors. Maybe maybe we saw, a lot of people have problems in terms of psychological problems, psychiatry, rooms were full of people, but at the same time it was an opportunity for the people to tackle that, to to prepare for when to come back. So some new we are just living 1 year, maybe the pandemic, how it was in 2000 and 2020 and 2021. Maybe you're starting to see some changes related to that. In terms, let's just bring one example. In terms how we see the environment, the problem of the climate changes, but even the things that are very related to our daily lives, people's daily lives, to start to see the importance of connecting to friends, connecting to family, to sometimes the problem of some sort of um, problems with other people, difficult to to forgive the other. The importance that I think was interesting in terms of the pandemic. And when we get back to international trips after the pandemic, is one thing for us to maybe reflect more. During the pandemic, did I if make very good movements in terms of self-consciential therapy, in terms of maturation, so I can be a better traveler when it's possible to be. So maybe some ideas relate to what you just brought to us, Regina. I hope that it brought some light to what you want to ask.
So, Paulo, we are getting close to our time here. Would you like to make any final comments to the group, to the audience?
No, I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity. It was great to be here. And I hope that these ideas could be transforming even better ideas when people think about that, and that it really have a good repercussion in one's existential program. I think that international travel, and even mainly when we talk to people that are already involved in international, and we know that's the case of the audience here in that program, that it makes that the reach of the initiatives that those people are doing enhance even more. We know that our tendency is to connect with other conscientiologists all around the globe, and these connections, like the ones that this program is promoting, the bridge talks, the bridge researchers, the bridge authors, we know how important this is to um, make people closer one to another, and we know that it has impact in what every one of us does in our extension program. Thank you very much again, Marcel.
Thank you. And I think that this comment here from Maria Nestor, that's very, very good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Abrantes. Interest exposition. I think it's time for more and more young people to be coopted in the knowledge of assistance in conscientiology. Yeah, that's
Reminder. Let's change this COPT to reminder.
yes,
Let's
a reminder. Okay, a
Yes,
reminder
a
from what
reminder. Yeah.
we talked a lot about planning from the intermissive course.
Yes.
Let's change the word from reminder from what we plan to do it in this trip here in this planet. Okay, some other people here. Regina, also thank you a lot. Same
Thank you,
from
Regina.
Liliana. Thank you for sharing. And I would like to thank everybody that joined us today. Special thanks for you, Paulo, for your exposition here, for your presentation. It was great. And then we are this year finishing the bridge researchers, but 2023, we are going to have more lectures with ISIC. Just join us during the next year. And then thank you all. Okay, it was great to have you, everybody here. Thank you.
Bye bye, people.